Hello, welcome to Matt Loves Eurovision. This is my first reaction or first impressions to the just announced running orders of semi-finals 1 and 2 for Eurovision 2023. It came out slightly out of the blue a couple of days ago to say that the semi-final running orders were coming out a bit sooner, I think, than many of us expected. And of course, speculating on what the running order will be and how it will affect various songs' chances is something that we Eurofans love endlessly speculating about. But we haven't had huge amounts of time to do it this time because we only had the last songs sort of confirmed a couple of weeks or two ago. So yes, this has come quite soon. Now, I thought what I'd do is just a very quick point out a couple of just interesting things and just a general my sort of initial thoughts, such as they are on it. But I'm not going to do a kind of a detailed a sort of look at how I think it's going to affect, looking at individual countries' chances, or in lots of detail, largely because various other YouTube channels do it much more detailed, like ESC Tom and also ESC United have both done I think they've both done some reactions and much more kind of detailed breakdown of what it might mean than I'm probably capable of. And also, I want to talk about kind of qualification chances when I do my daily previews for each sort of country, and so it'd be worth me sort of having something to say then. But yes, I thought I'd do just a quick thought over it, and I think it's been an interesting one. Some running orders have been producer decided, so since 2013, since Sweden hosted back in 2013, they changed it from a random running order to a producer-led running order, and there's been various rules about people draw in halves, so it's there's some equity or fairness to it, so it can't be they can't just stack all the popular ones in the second halves and etc. So but it's always quite an exciting time to learn kind of what the semi-finals are going to be. You know them well in advance. Obviously, grand final you only find out really on the late at night or early of the Thursday, or the early on Friday. So this year, I think for the BBC and the EBU, they've had. I think they've actually had some. It's been quite good for them this year in terms of doing a running order, because we have a lot of different genres at Eurovision this year, which I think is a really positive thing, because it means that there's more. It broadens the appeal for people, and I think, and they've also got quite a wide variety of artists as well. So we have male solo, female solo, female duos. We've got various bands as well, and then obviously you add them into the different genres of music, which means you've got a really good mix, which means for a running order where you want to have that sort of blend of not kind of having the same sort of genre or the same type of artist song after song after song, it gives a bit of a benefit. It makes it a bit easier, I think, to do a running order. Or maybe not easier, it's more luxury, I think, in it. But also you do still have just the way that the draw falls out, and which countries go in which semi-final. And I think this year, there's a general consensus that there are a lot of some of the big favourites are all sitting in semi-final 1. And so, although it's it is at this stage when we haven't seen the staging, we haven't even seen live vocals from everybody, but there's clearly some favourites that sit and say you can define from sort of Eurovision app and from commentary, and you have I think amongst 4 of the top 5 from the Eurovision scoreboard app are all sitting in semi-final 1, whereas in semi-final 2 it's not such a clear-cut bunch of favourites, and which again leads to perhaps some challenges. So it was going to be interesting to see what they did, who they put where. So without wanting to go into loads of detail, opening semi-final 1, we have actually one of the fan favourites, which is Norway. Big, strong opener. I think for that first song of the first semi, you do want something that is reliable and is impactful, and I think they have that with Norway. traditionally the worst spots are in semi-finals for qualifying are second and third. Second is not necessarily worse than third because it's not about winning, because everyone knows that in second place, no one's ever won from second place. But for obviously semi-finals, it's who qualifies. But second and third have always been the most challenging. And I think I can certainly see with Malta has been put in the second slot this year. You can see it's another upbeat song, keeps the tempo going, but it's a tough draw for Malta. Serbia has been put in place 3, which they got last year, and of course we had Constructor as a very kind of unusual sort of song, and obviously it sailed through to the final, so it had no problems with where it was put. You never know, that might be the same case with Serbia as well, because they've got another quite alternative and very different style of song to anyone else this year as well, so we shall see. It was interesting to see kind of how they were going to split the big 3 or 4 in here, because you have the top 3 in the Eurovision scoreboard app at the moment, as it is at the moment, all sit in this semi-final. So Norway being 1, and the other 2 being Sweden and Finland, and they've actually separated them out quite far. Norway's at the start. Sweden is coming around the middle in 11th place with Lorraine, and we have Finland. Karja is closing the show with a great big, that'll be an epic closer, I'm sure. So there's some, it's split it out quite nicely across the semi, and some of the other ones I don't. In terms of surprises of the others, I don't think there's anything that's sort of standing out as being really odd. I think I've just watched it a couple of times, and it feels like it flows quite well. I think Portugal has, although it's in 5th in the running order, which I'm not sure, I can't remember whether that was how decent a place that is or not, but it's sandwiched between it's kind of standing unique in its genre with 2 very sort of similar, well, 2 other songs on indie pops that are on either side of it. So I think that might serve it well when it comes to sort of the voting. Which anyway, I will talk about that more when I reach those sorts of songs in my top 37. Semi-final 2 was or perhaps the slightly more difficult one to define, because everyone talks about semi-1 being sort of bloodbath and really difficult. It's like, well, it has a chunk of songs that are all sitting quite high up in the Eurovision scoreboard app, and there's a lot of very, very strong songs, fan favourites in there. Whereas Semi-2 has not quite got the same level of that. It's also got more countries that have struggled to qualify regularly as well. So there's some real chances there. This has got a slightly quirkier running order, because they started off with Denmark, there was only really a couple of upbeat songs they had to choose from in semi-final 2 in the first half, and they've plumped with Denmark. The other choice would have been Belgium. But what's really interesting is they've chosen Armenia as the number 2 slot, and I think there's a lot of people go, "Oh my God, it's ruined." What's about Armenia's chance? Because Armenia, I think, was quite well regarded. I don't think they're putting that to kill it. I think it's actually, I think when you've got it's quite a distinctive song, and I think it's one of those ones where they want to keep people's interest at the start of the show, and I don't think it's actually going to affect Armenia's chances. It might impact either side, Denmark and Romania's chances, you never know, rather than kind of affecting Armenia's chances. But I think that's been the one, I think that's been the most, I would say, controversial, or the most sort of, people have gone, "Oh, why have they, well, that's a bit odd." But yeah, I would see Armenia qualifying, but other than that, it's again, they've tried to mix things up. I think it's slightly more difficult to split genres or artist types up in this one. So we have got a couple where we've got back-to-back we've got sort of back-to-back similarities of sort of vocalists and stuff, but they've done their best to kind of to split it up, and they've ended with, again, I think they were either going to end with what was probably the big fan favourite, is Austria, or they were going to end with, as they have done with Australia, just the type of song it is, it's a big rock song, which I think will probably boost Australia's chances getting through. But I think that one's there's a reason everyone keeps calling it a very open semi-final. I think it's just because I think when people say it's an open semi-final, it's generally because they struggle to predict who it will be. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of who I think is going to qualify, because as I say, I'm going to talk more about that in my top 37 when I go through. One thing I did want to sort of raise is so last year I did kind of I did number crunch to see kind of the qualification records from from the various positions, which was quite interesting, and that's where and a lot of people have now sort of done those kinds of calculations. I don't know whether people have done and updated their calculation to just work out how the places do with televote only, because obviously this year it's televote only, not jury as well. I don't know whether it'll be a huge amount of difference. Like, say if you went to say it's, how many the number of points that get given by televote to the different positions. I'm not sure whether it'll be a huge amount of difference, but I haven't crunched the numbers to work that one out. And what I have crunched the numbers is one thing I thought would be quite interesting to do is to look at kind of the basket of countries you have in each semi and how they have voted in the past televote only to each other. Because we all know that that there's, you can look back and work out how many points countries have given, but they are, aside from the most recent years, they are not televote only. So I did a bit of a number crunch of looking at how all the countries plus the automatic qualifiers in each of these semis had voted in the past in 2008 and also between 2016 and 2022, and did a big giant spreadsheet and just worked out kind of what was the average, what was the kind of percentage of total points they could have got from that set of countries over the past X number of years, which kind of gives an overall picture of success. But also, I also worked out kind of what was the average sort of points they got from each other country. So, for example, had country X received, they'd given 50% of the points that they could to that country Y. But of course, they might have only voted for them twice, because they might have only been in the same semi twice, and of course, in other times they might have been in they might have been 6 semis together. And so it's just sort of balancing that out. But it gives a flavour of sort of potential voting patterns and voting clusters, and it's certainly highlighted for me it's reiterated some connections that we knew. I mean, everyone knows about Greece and Cyprus, but there's that, and you also kind of know there's a bit like Armenia as well. It's kind of connected into Greece, Cyprus, but you also have Albania in that as well. Gets caught up, but more in the giving than receiving points, and also to a certain extent Georgia, and they all are sitting in the same semi-final. For the UK, you can see, although obviously the UK doesn't have to qualify, but the UK points, well, where do they go? Lithuania and Poland. When you look back, that's where their main points go to. And Portugal does very well from France and Switzerland, again, in televote. So it's limited, or in that you can't, it doesn't take into account kind of what other countries were in those semis back in those Eurovisions that might have then impacted on the televotes they received. So, for example, I guess if you had a cluster of Balkan countries one year and then the next year they only had 1 or 2, you can see that potentially that would have affected how much they gave to other Balkan countries. But I think it gives a rough idea, and it's quite interesting anyway. It sort of just gives you a bit of a flavour of, is there a kind of a latent televote for some of these sort of some of the countries? And so again, I'll use some of that information when I do my top 37, but I'll pop in the description 2 links to Google Sheets where I've got all of the data, all of the sheet, the sort of the tabs, so you can see every single country that are in the semi-finals and how they have been voted, how the other countries in that semi-final have voted for them in the past from televote only. In those contests where we can work that one out. So yes, if you're interested in lots of nerdy numbers, please do take a look. So I said this was going to be quite short, and I've now nattered on for 15 minutes. But yeah, I think that's just as of a quick overview. As I say, I will be starting my previews very soon. 1st of April is when I will post up my number 37. I'll do a little preview of my previews. Before that, I will probably put that up in the next week or so. But that's really just an introduction to kind of how I do my previews, and not to get too upset when I don't put your favourite too high. It's just my own personal view. So yes, those will come up soon. But obviously, as always, if you've got thoughts on the running order, if you've got thoughts on my mad calculations that I've done as well, if you care to take a look, please do, as of course, comment below. And obviously like, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell, and we will see you again soon.